who's got a motherboard that they hope it's going to run circles around the competition? The officially licensed from Sega Sonic the Hedgehog motherboard from ASRock. And this isn't the first Sonic the Hedgehog motherboard that we've seen from ASRock, but this is Micro ATX LGA 1700 by popular demand. Sega! Let's unbox. So this is sort of unusual, I guess. It's DDR5, it's a B760M Phantom Gaming Sonic Wi-Fi. This is really not a lot different than some of the other models that ASRock has. It's just a different aesthetic. Basically, they've dressed up an existing motherboard design. So this is not a totally unique motherboard design. It's a 12+1+1 power delivery. It was surprisingly competent with the 13900K. If you're going to do extreme overclocking, you probably do want to look at one of the higher end boards. But if you've got a 13900 non-K or a 13700K, I think this motherboard would do fine in pretty much every scenario except extreme overclocking and extreme memory speed scenarios. Now this is also a 6-layer PCB, so when we're talking about overclocking and performance and that sort of thing, DDR5 6000 is well within the realm of possibility. But some of the highest speeds that we've seen from LGA 1700, like DDR5 7200, a little bit more of a challenge with only a 6-layer PCB. 6 layers is great. It's on the higher end when we're talking about B760, B760M, and we're not talking about the most expensive 13900 or 13900KS CPUs. It's actually pretty good. The I/O on this motherboard is also surprisingly good, again, for a sub 200 US, at least at the time that I'm doing this video. It's the pricing on this is pretty aggressive because economic downturn, I guess, and everything else. So let's take a quick look at the rear I/O. We get DisplayPort and HDMI. If you get the Wi-Fi version, the B760M, it's a 2230 Wi-Fi module. It is a Wi-Fi 6E solution, so that's on board. Or if you get the version of this motherboard that doesn't have that, then you can optionally add it. That's where it would go on the rear I/O. Get the combo PS2 mouse and keyboard port, so you can rock a Model M PS2 keyboard if you really wanted to. 2 USB 2 ports. Then you've got 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports. Then you've got a Type A and a Type C 10 gigabit port in a stack, and then you've got 2 more 5 gigabit ports along with your Realtek Dragon 2.5 gigabit LAN right on board. We've also got the Realtek 897 audio codec with in, out, and microphone connections at the back. So 3 audio connections. Now, even though this is a lower cost board, DDR5, the blazing M.2, so you have a PCI Express 5.0 M.2 for whenever those are generally available, as well as your X16 slot for future PCIe 5.0 graphics. Officially from ASRock, they talk about supporting up to 6800 OC, but my G.Skill Trident Z memory kit that is rated for 7200, it was possible for me to get 6800 working on this, but I really had to dial in a couple of obscure settings on the B760M chipset. Don't know that I 100% recommend that. I don't know how repeatable that's going to be. 6800 was achievable, but I think 6400 to 6000 is a more reasonable expectation for this board, especially when we're talking about 2 DIMMs. Although you could rock up to 128 gigabytes on this board if you're okay with a lower DDR5 transfer rate. In the box, you've got 2 Velcro strips. You've also got dual antennas for your Wi-Fi 6E solution. I would have liked to have seen a higher end, more premium antenna solution, something movable, but this will get the job done. You get 2 6 gigabit per second SATA ports to use with your onboard SATA, all of your M.2 mounting hardware, because you've got several M.2 slots, your installation manual, and of course, the motherboard itself. This motherboard also has one other really killer feature on the back. This connector is an embedded DisplayPort connector. This will let you connect an LCD panel directly to your motherboard. It's DisplayPort in terms of the protocol, but this connector means that you can mount an LCD screen behind the tempered glass in your case, the way that we did with the Lian-Li 011 Dynamic. You can use that for status displays, readouts, and everything else. I want to do a demo build with embedded DisplayPort so that you get a little bit more of an idea about how that's going to work. But basically, you can have a display literally inside your computer connected directly to your motherboard, and the integrated GPU on your CPU will support that display, as well as, your traditional display out on the back. But all the cabling would be internal to your system, and this connector from ASRock also supplies power, so that's pretty cool. In terms of the PCIe slot layout, this is a great micro ATX layout. because, you know, micro ATX motherboard is going to be 4 slots. Some micro ATX cases give you 5 slots physically of room, but this will let you run a triple or quadruple slot GPU, no problem. We also have an extra PCI Express by 1 slot down here at the bottom, so you could run an add-in card of some kind, capture, whatever. And then we've got 2 M.2 slots at the bottom edge of the motherboard here, connected through our DMI chipset, that B760 chipset. So that'll work pretty well, and then our blazing M.2 up here. Now in terms of the rest of the layout of the board, we have 2 4-pin fan headers at the bottom edge, 1 at the front, and 2 along the top edge of the motherboard. Pretty good for a micro ATX system. We have Type A and Type C front panel connections for our USB, as well as 2 USB 2.0 headers along the bottom edge of the motherboard. For RGB, we have a single 50/50 header at the bottom edge of the motherboard, and 3 addressable LED headers, 1 at the bottom edge and 2 at the front. For postcodes and diagnostics and that sort of thing, we have 4 LEDs for indicators if you're having problems booting. It's CPU, DRAM, VGA, and boot. I actually like this on lower cost boards because it gives you some idea of what's wrong. And remember, DDR5 takes a long time to train. So if you build a system, don't be too concerned if it takes north of a minute for that initial power on self-test to do the memory training on this platform. This motherboard also features 4 SATA ports. Now personally, I think it's pretty interesting, you know, one to capitalize on our youth. It has an animated sort of old school holographic sticker. I don't really, you know, it's not a screen or a display or anything. It's not anything as fancy as the actual moving gear that ASRock put on some of their Tai Chi motherboards. So it's like you had a mechanical gear that would physically move, you could show off in your case. Nothing that fancy, but this is a lower cost motherboard for LGA 1700 after all. This would be a good pairing with an i5 or possibly even the i7 13700K. But like I said, if you're going to spend the money on 13900K, you probably should get a higher end motherboard to go with that 13900K. This would be a great motherboard for the 13900 though, and it would let you run the 13900 out of spec. Not an overclock exactly, but you could supply that 13900 with 200 and some watts all the time, so you get a little bit better turbos and everything else, as long as you can keep up with the thermals in terms of your cooling solution. So, you know, 360mm radiator, giant tower cooler, something like that. A little harder to do in a micro ATX build, but, you know, doable. In terms of Linux support, because pretty much everything on this motherboard is tried and true except the chipset, and the chipset's really not a lot of changes over the you know, prior generation Alder Lake chipset that we saw. This works pretty much out of the box with Linux. And of course, ASRock's BIOS has excellent support for all the knobs and tunables that you would need to, you know, play with the settings on Linux in terms of enabling IOMMU and changing some of the other parameters that, you know, is sort of fun to play with on the Linux side of things. So good job, ASRock. Yeah, that's sort of a quick look at the micro ATX version. You know, ASRock first launched the full-size ATX, you know, Sonic branding, Sega licensing thing last year, and everybody was really excited. But we had a lot of people in the forum posts like, man, I really wish they had a micro ATX version. Well, here you go. This has been a quick look at ASRock's Phantom Gaming B760M Sonic Edition. Sonic the Hedgehog, alive and well, in your motherboard. Sonic the motherboard, if you will. I'm Whittle, this is Level 1. I'm signing out. You can find me in the Level 1 forums.